Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I think we're all looking lively and awake at this. It was dark 100 when we started to get here, I guess, but we're here, and we're looking forward to a really great event. I'm Tim Clark, editor-at-large at Government Executive Magazine and NextGov, and I want to welcome you here to this terrific event called Improving Operational Efficiencies in Government. Today's event would not be possible without the generous support of Siemens, which has long been a supporter of government executive and other parts of the Atlantic Media Company in which we reside. Atlantic Media Company is a terrific 600-person company that publishes the Atlantic, National Journal, Government Executive, and a variety of other services. Siemens, so welcome to Siemens. For more than 165 years, Siemens has built a reputation for leading-edge innovation and high-quality products, services, and solutions. Siemens Government Technologies Incorporated is a federal-compliant U.S. organization structured to address challenges arising in infrastructure, energy, industrial automation, and healthcare to meet the needs of federal customers. And we are fortunate today to have with us from Siemens Mike Kearney, who is head of building performance and sustainability in the Americas for Siemens. Mike oversees services to energy and environmental customers throughout the Americas, and I'd like to welcome Mike to give us a few remarks. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Tim. Good morning. You all found the pavilion. That was a good start. Some of you may wonder why Siemens decided to sponsor an event like this. Many of you know Siemens as a technology provider, specifically in the area of energy efficiency and building technologies. And although that is true, what we found in recent years was something was missing. And it really had to do with the human element. Things like behavior modifications, cultural changes, energy awareness. The human element is something that we wanted to get more answers to. Think of it like many of you have your first smartphone device. When you first had that, you had this great technology, didn't exactly know how to use it, and you certainly weren't able to tap into all that the technology had to offer. Getting answers to questions like that is really the reason why we sponsored the survey. The survey is raising your agency's energy IQ with smart technologies. And we did that in conjunction with the Government Business Council. Later this morning, you're going to hear from my colleague, Barbara Humpton, as she talks about the U.S. federal government's mandate towards energy efficiency and energy reduction, and how smart technologies can help the government address this mighty challenge. And then I invite you in the room next door to join us into an interactive post-session discussion. The focus there is we're going to dig deeper into the results of the survey. We're going to have a Q&A session with a panel format. And we're going to hear about some best practices that organizations and companies are doing in the area of energy efficiency. And those are going to be both public sector and private sector customers. On that note, I'm excited to start this session. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Tim. Thank you.
We're privileged to have with us Barbara Humpton, who is Senior Vice President of Siemens Government Technology, overseeing the full portfolio of services that Siemens Government Technology provides to federal clients. She's going to talk to us a little bit about empowering government agencies to drive operating efficiencies. Welcome, Barbara.
Am I all right? Yes, you can hear me. When this government was founded, we lit our offices with candles. We heated them with wood. Business progressed at the speed of the horse, the courier, the town crier. What was operational efficiency then? What was energy efficiency? And how would they know? Fast forward now. when the country emerged from the strife of the Civil War. We were heating our offices with this newfound steam capability. Lights were gas-fueled. Communication sped up to the speed of the telegraph. Innovation. Wow, a short time later, we were back from a world war. There was electricity now in our offices, and there was this interesting new steam plant right here in Washington, D.C., providing heat to the buildings here around the National Mall and the White House. Communication sped up to the rate of what could be transferred with telephones. Innovation. But what was operational efficiency for them, and how did they know? Well, lucky for us, we are not living in the Age of Enlightenment. We're not living in the Industrial Revolution. We're not even living in the information age. We're living in the entertainment age. Oh, oops, that's actually a topic for another talk. We'll come back, invite me back and we can have that discussion. No, the age we're living in right now, I'm gonna call the empowerment age. And I mean it as a triple entendre, triple. What's the first meaning? We are empowered now through the data that tells us what we're using. You've heard from each of our prior speakers about the value of metering and understanding who's using what. That's empowerment. We have control. There's another sort of empowerment we have today. We are actually powering our businesses, our buildings, our mission with alternative sources of energy. Solar, wind, biomass, geothermal, low-cost gas. All of these things are forms of empowerment for us, but there's actually a third form of empowerment where I really want to focus our attention this morning, and that is our empowerment over how we acquire the tools we need in order to have an efficient government. So, Enlightenment, Industrial Revolution, information, and now empowerment. Let's focus first on that whole subject of the controls. I don't know how many of you all know what our number one energy use is. Everybody's thinking lights, et cetera. No, water. Water is generally the highest consumer of energy in our buildings. But the controls on lighting and water, the heating that we have here in the building, these are relatively low-cost changes that we have control over. So when we implement efficiencies, we get nearly immediate payback. That is a powerful tool, and all too often, our government agencies recognize that opportunity and act nearly immediately. I have funding, I can purchase LEDs, I can upgrade my water systems, and I'll get an immediate payback that'll save me money, and that saves money for the mission. And that's true. But we also have some more advanced needs. The need for alternative energy, and how many of you are aware of, well, actually we've heard now about the challenge for the solar project right here in DC. You may not know that in general, renewable energy projects have a very long payback. So to make an investment in a system that will pay back over 25 years is actually a daunting task for a lot of agencies. Well, it turns out you've been given empowerment by statute to do something pretty remarkable through a tool you've heard about a couple of times already this morning, performance contracting. You actually have the ability to bundle up a whole series of energy conservation and power generation techniques into an energy savings performance contract. And the way it works is pretty simple, but it needs data. Step one is to baseline what's the energy usage for your organization. Once you understand that, you can start to strategize. If I could save money on my utility bill, I could actually get things done. So you bundle together those lighting efficiencies that generate a lot of payback very quickly. You put that together with the more complex things you need to achieve for overall sustainability and efficiency, and you create a project. And that project needs to be something that we'll call bankable. Financial investors can look at that and say, that's something I would invest money in because I know this has a guaranteed payback. A financial institution pays for the implementation of the project, and all you ever do is pay your utility bill or less. Actually, if the project doesn't deliver the guaranteed savings, a company like ours who's built this project will actually pay back the difference. So you're guaranteed to save money or keep your utility bill the same, but you get the efficiencies for the future. It's a very powerful tool. Now, I realize that many of us who are sitting in the room are looking to our left and looking to our right and saying, we're not the ones who get to make these decisions. Who does? Well, often we're getting to make these decisions with the help of our facility managers, our energy managers, with the support of the Department of Energy, the GSA, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. These are all entities that are helping to implement this concept that drives savings overall. So all I need to do is leave you with this thought, that we're empowered. We actually have controls, we have alternative forms of energy, and we have the statutory capability to do what needs to be done to drive greater efficiency in government. Later on this morning, I'll join my colleague Mike Kearney, and we'll engage in a little bit of dialogue with you. So I encourage you to join us, ask your questions, and let's get the ball rolling. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I promise there won't be any math in this session, so I think we got that over with before. My name is Zoe Grotefors, and I'm the Manager of Research and Strategic Insights with Government Business Council. We are the Research and Intelligence Division of Government Executive Media Group. And I'd like to welcome you to today's session, Improving Operational Efficiencies in Government. And then our session here today is Raising Your Agency's Energy IQ with Smart Technologies. It's brought to you by Siemens. As you're all likely aware, the federal government is continuing its ambitious energy strategy designed to curtail the global rise in greenhouse gas emissions and promote energy efficiency and security in the United States. And as it does so, it has consistently maintained that federal agencies will lead by example. These initiatives are increasingly drawing attention to buildings, since they are responsible for 40% of the total energy consumption in the United States. Now, in the face of shrinking budgets and surging energy prices, smart technologies, which rely on integrated systems to automate key building functions, could be the key to promoting sustainability, cutting costs, and enhancing performance in the federal government. Noting these pressures, Government Executive and Government Business Council, along with Siemens, deployed a survey in September 2014. We wanted to learn about federal attitudes on energy efficiency, and we wanted to see about the role of smart technologies in helping to meet these goals. Today, we're excited to share the results of this survey with you. Today is also the release of the final report associated with the study, which you can find at govexec.com/gbc, and you also have an executive summary on your chairs. After we look at the findings, we'll dive a bit deeper with Barbara Humpton and Mike Kearney from Siemens, who you guys have met earlier today, who will help us discuss how federal agencies can use this information to develop innovative and cost-effective energy solutions. Now, before we look at the data in too much detail, it's important to first look at who we spoke with. Our pool of 321 respondents includes those at the GS11 through GS15 grade levels and members of the Senior Executive Service. As you can see on this slide, our sample was quite senior. We had 74% that were at GS12 or above level, and 41% managed at least one direct report. We also had a wide variety of job functions represented, though the technical and scientific function had 17% in our sample. We also see quite large numbers of program and project managers and administrative professionals. But a lot of others are represented as well, including facilities management, which we spoke about earlier as being closely tied to smart technologies. We also had a wide variety of a wide variety of agencies represented. This list has 28 at least represented in the sample, and you can see it includes defense and civilian. So with that, I'd like to move on to the key research findings. Our first finding is that federal executives are currently quite pessimistic about meeting their agency's energy goals. We asked how confident federal leaders are in their agency's ability to meet its Energy Independence and Security Act goal, and that's to reduce energy intensity by 30% by 2015. We see that 68% of respondents are less than confident. We also see that for about 1/3 of respondents, budget cuts are perceived to have had a negative effect on energy initiatives. 34% of our respondents indicate that budget cuts have had a mostly negative impact on their department or agency's energy efficiency by preventing investment in more energy efficient technologies. We also see that in order to reach these energy reduction goals, agencies are encouraging employees to use energy more efficiently. We asked, which of the following strategies has your department or agency adopted to improve energy efficiency? And we see that encouraging employees to adopt energy efficient work habits is the top choice. 41% select this. But despite agency efforts to encourage these types of work habits, we see that employees are not more energy conscious than they were 12 months ago, at least as perceived by their peers. Only 48% of respondents agree or strongly agree that employees are more conscious of their energy usage than they were 12 months ago. Now, recent studies, including those by the Department of Energy, have found that efforts to encourage employees to adopt more energy efficient work habits are most successful when used in conjunction with data on energy consumption that is made accessible in near real time. Knowing this, we wanted to see if federal employees see the value in more accessible energy information. And we see that nearly 3/4 of respondents agree that if employees had greater access to data on their energy usage, they would more effectively manage their consumption. Now, this is the same slide we saw a couple minutes ago, showing the strategies that agencies are using to encourage more energy efficient work habits. But I wanted to highlight one piece in particular that you see in green here. We see that very few respondents, or 7%, say that their department or agency is displaying energy usage via a department-wide dashboard. So these slides that we just looked at really show how data can be used to motivate individual behavior change. But our survey and our panel that follows will really talk about taking it to the next level and thinking about automating and encouraging energy strategies that are more integrated. On this slide, we asked respondents to rank a list of strategies in order of how the federal government should prioritize them. You'll see that our top choice there, and these are ranked by mean, is that federal employees believe that agencies should be constructing and retrofitting buildings with smart technologies. Our second choice there is that they should be constructing and retrofitting buildings with green technologies. And this is a distinction that I think we've touched on today, but we'll get into a bit more in detail. Going a bit deeper into smart technologies, we asked about the most important benefits. We see that greater energy efficiency is the top choice, selected by 69%, followed by lower operations and maintenance, or O&M costs, a choice selected by 61% of our sample. But yet, despite these benefits that seem to be clearly understood, we asked also to see why they might not be going to these things and what could be slowing them down. We see that most of our respondents don't know their agency's smart technology plans, or they perceive to have made little progress. We asked the expected time frame for implementation of smart technologies, and we see that only 18% of respondents say that they currently, or will within 10 years, work in a federal smart building facility. We also see that 56% of this sample say that they don't know the expected time frame for smart technologies. So why are they not moving faster? If we've talked about benefits, so we wanted to know about concerns. The primary reason is the perception of high upfront costs, something that's identified as a concern by 43% of our sample. 23% also say that they expect a low return on investment. And a full 39% don't know why their agencies aren't moving to smart technologies. So with that wraps up the research highlights. And now I'm glad to join Barbara Humpton and Mike Kearney from Siemens on the stage to discuss the findings in a bit more detail. As a reminder, if you're interested in viewing the full report, which I shared some of with you today, you can visit our site at govexec.com/GBC. All right. Thank you guys both so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Before we get started, I know you guys have been introduced to our panel a little bit before, but I just wanted to give a little more background and more detail on each of you. So seated next to me, we have Mike Kearney. Mike leads the Building Performance and Sustainability for the Americas in Siemens Building Technologies Division. In his role, he's responsible for helping BPS sales staff, energy engineers, and project managers deliver outstanding value to energy and environmental customers throughout the Americas. Seated next to Mike, we have Barbara Humpton. Barbara is the Senior Vice President of Business Development for Siemens Government Technologies, where she brings more than 25 years of leadership, program management, and capture experience in software development and systems integration programs. She's responsible for enabling Siemens to help federal customers perform their missions to address national imperatives in infrastructure, energy, and healthcare with the company's innovative engineering and technology. Now, as we begin our panel on the relationship between energy efficiency and technology, I'd like to take a minute to go back to something that I mentioned in the presentation. We've talked a lot about green and smart technologies. I think we've heard from people on both sides today. But in your words, could you guys describe the difference there? Because I think it is a key distinction.
Sure, I'll go first. Smart, and you've heard it earlier today, it has to do a lot with instrumentation and integration. Taking information from different systems and be able to make intelligent decisions based on that information. It even goes a little bit further to automate those decisions. Green is more holistic in nature. It's more about the outcome. I'm familiar with the LEED point system. It has more to do with energy awareness, comfort in the building, indoor environmental quality, where materials are sourced. One distinction is you don't necessarily need smart to be partially green. Things like bike racks, natural daylighting, outside air coming into the facility. You don't need a lot of smart technology to be green in that context. But where the real power is when you force the two together. Because this green movement that we see really is going to be benefited by smart technologies.
Great. So I think one thing that we really want to get into today is how can smart technologies help the federal government? Where are they already being used, but where could we go even farther? Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Well, let's build on this for a minute. We've been talking quite a bit about the need to engage these kinds of technologies in operational missions. So, where Siemens has lots of experience in buildings and building performance, it's you can see Siemens is integrating technologies from a lot of different sources in order to achieve our goals there. We're also stretching further out into the operational mission, and we talked a little bit today about hybrid drives. You'll see Siemens actually stepping out into the world of performance testing, et cetera. Anywhere you see high energy usage, you can look for the kind of automation technology that will draw down the use of energy overall. Now, what's tough for government is exactly what we talked about previously. It's tough for government to be able to share that operational data. So we need to find ways to keep the data secure so that we can take these practices from the commercial arena, bring them into government, and get the power of that in maximizing efficiency on the operational side of the mission.
Mm-hmm. And when we talk about integration, what kinds of building functions are we integrating with that energy usage?
Well, it's disparate electrical, heating, air conditioning systems. Integration even goes a little bit further, though, than the equipment on site. It's tying to the local utility and taking advantage of incentives, rebates, or sometimes mandates. Integration goes even a step further, and it involves the people aspect. You've got leadership, you've got building occupants, you've got finances, you've got all different, HR and all different aspects that keep the facility and the mission moving. And so true integration is taking equipment, technology, tying in with the utility, and then making sure that ties to the mission of that agency, and that's where the people piece comes in.
Mm-hmm. Let me highlight something, though, that's a current topic that dovetails with this, and the cybersecurity of industrial control systems. We've seen government step forward and bring in building automation and controls. We've seen those controls be hosted on an IT backbone. And that in and of itself introduces vulnerabilities into the system. So one of the things we're working on, it's a high priority, is as we move forward with integration, securing those systems, attending to the cybersecurity of industrial controls.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for bringing that up. I think that is something that's top of mind as we talk about integrating disparate systems and the benefits we get from that, but that's also something to consider. And now, one thing we talked about in the survey a bit, and I just want to call attention to, is the survey is really about perceptions, right? It's about what the federal workforce believes is going on with energy efficiency right now. And it may or may not really reflect the reality and the progress that's actually going on. How would you characterize the government's current efforts at energy efficiency? What things do you see that are happening, whether they're reflected in the survey or not?
Can I start with some data? I brought up the subject of energy savings performance contracting. We've heard about it in each of the segments today. Many of you may be aware that in 2011, President Obama put out an executive order. The goal of his directive, it was to generate $2 billion in performance contracting. Just last year, that was further extended, $4 billion worth of privately financed projects to drive this kind of energy efficiency. Well, quarterly, the Department of Energy puts out a report that shows progress toward that goal. I'm happy to say they have actually awarded $1.7 billion of performance contracts. Now, Siemens knows about this. We're intimately involved in that, and we see the opportunity for even more. There's an estimate that says there's approximately $20 billion worth of potential savings that could be financed in this way. So I think from the performance contracting side, we're off to a good start, and there's plenty of work ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing to add on, and we heard it in the prior session from Sharon Burke, which was, I think, a very smart comment, is the people side of things. And it's very important to know that we've made progress, but if the people aren't buying into the mission and understanding the purpose of why we're doing what we're doing, it can get a good start, but in order for it to be sustainable, you've got to have all stakeholders fully on board with the direction that you're going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the discussion of drivers earlier was quite interesting. Mm-hmm. There really are a lot of things that I think are making us think about this right now. It's very timely. So given that we have made maybe more progress than perhaps the average Fed would indicate in our survey, what do you guys think is responsible for this kind of pessimism that we're seeing? High concerns about things that like high upfront costs and low return on investment, and then not even really feeling like they're going to meet the goals in fiscal year 2015?
I think it's partly lack of awareness. There are a lot of good examples of work that's going out, both in the federal government and in the private and other public sectors. It's getting the word out. It's you saw earlier, so I think only 7% had dashboards or green screens, touch screens, out. NASA Armstrong out in Southern California, formerly named NASA Dryden, has in their 4,800 building a massive big screen TV that's got a touch screen that informs everyone that walks into that lobby of that building, where everyone comes into that site, about what they're doing, why they're doing it. But it's not just front-facing. They're also making sure that there's training and for the occupants and the folks that go into those buildings, so they truly understand the reason for what's being done. It's getting everyone to buy in. So I think it's largely awareness. And the more best practice sharing we can do to understand that, hey, this is achievable, and people can relate to others that have done this and have taken the leap. But leadership has got to drive that and make sure that they can correlate where they want to go to the people who are in the facilities that can actually make it happen.
Yeah, we heard earlier that the interagency sharing of best practices is something that is really picking up, which I think is encouraging. When you guys think about the private sector as well, are there things that government could learn from some of maybe the commercial people that you're helping, or even your agency yourself?
Why don't you take that, Mike, since you do serve that market?
There's a number in private and other public sectors. I'll just give you one example. It is public sector, but it's not federal, is the state of Mississippi. They have an Energy Works program that made sure that they wanted to go into green and sustainable measures, but they made sure that every agency, every department had to come up with an energy master plan. Write it down, submit it, and then every 5 years after that have to resubmit and relook at the plan. But they didn't just stop there. Similar to NASA Armstrong, they're coming out with training programs to make sure to empower, get to what you talked about earlier, Barbara, empowering people to make decisions but understanding what the mission was. So that's something that the state of Mississippi is doing. Right here, British Aerospace Enterprises, which their biggest customer is the federal government. They've taken great measures. They started off doing supply side management, and it was about saving the almighty dollar. They were able to reduce their costs for natural gas and electricity. That was great. It was great for the bottom line, but they realized that they had older facilities. They had a directive to save greenhouse gas emissions, and the only way you're going to do that is by actually making physical improvements in the facilities. Well, they're a private enterprise, and they came up with Siemens a creative off-balance sheet financing mechanism that allowed to do these improvements without having to take on debt or raise any capital. So they stretched their thinking and went to innovation on the financing side in order to get work done.
So there's an interesting facet in all of this, which is, what's bankable? And it turns out that when we put together these kinds of projects, the financial institutions that make this possible are absolutely looking for proven technologies. They're looking for technologies that have a track record of delivering savings. And that's what we use as the basis for making our case for an energy savings performance contract and getting it financed. Here's the fascinating thing. When that technology is actually implemented, there's also the human element. And the Oak Ridge National Labs did a study of federal performance contracts that demonstrated that the actual savings delivered are anywhere between 150 and almost 200% of what the company had guaranteed. So the human element does take these performance contracts above and beyond, along with prudent planning on the part of the ESCOs. So back to your question about, how do you get this out? I think very often we view these as technology programs and maybe don't communicate enough to the employees in the agencies. I think there's a real opportunity to further publicize the projects and their results and get engagement to drive greater savings.
Yeah, I think when we talk about energy, we've talked before on our calls that it's really a management issue. It's also a technology issue, but it's maybe more both, right?
It is.
It's really bringing everything together. I think our survey really looked at that individual level, but when we add in the automation, it's really a full picture. So one thing I think is top of mind, we've heard it was a driver in the other room, the budget constraints, making people think more and more about energy efficiency, in addition to wanting to do good and help the earth and all of that. Could you guys talk about the budget impact of addressing energy costs?
Yeah, and so I'll start on this one because I have the pleasure of representing Siemens on the Federal Performance Contracting Coalition. What we've seen as an industry in this energy services arena is that the budget environment has driven a real change in the leadership tone from the top. The more constrained budgets have become, the more necessary it has been for agencies to look for alternative sources of funding. So the Navy is a great example, where previously the Navy had adequate budget to fund their infrastructure projects. They're now realizing that those monies can be better spent elsewhere. And the Assistant Secretary, actually this goes all the way up to the Secretary of the Navy, have demanded of the organization that they seek alternative forms of finance and that they do meet their overall energy goals. So I will tell you that leadership tone from the top is an absolute critical success factor for agencies pursuing this kind of movement from their operational budgets into privately financed projects.
Mm-hmm. And have we seen that change over time? Is this more of a pressure now than before?
What do you think, Mike? You've been engaged in this a while.
I think so. The other thing that can help is, and it gets into smart technologies, is once you have this data, it's just data until you do something with it. And what we see many times, and we saw a graph earlier from the GSA presentation, is sometimes this can tell you quickly where to go, and you may not need to go out and do a master plan and spend a lot of money and take 2 years to put a project, a very comprehensive project together. Sometimes there are quick wins and relatively short payback, low-cost payback measures that you can do immediately through retro-commissioning and other analytics by taking that information and finding where some of those quick wins are. So it doesn't always require a massive program and big initiative. If you inform the occupants and those that operate the facilities with that information, sometimes quick decisions, quick wins can happen as well.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a bit about retro-commissioning, what that would look like for an agency?
Yeah, basically it's taking a lot of information that you've gotten different data points of your systems and looking at benchmarking and seeing how your systems are operating and pointing you in the direction of where do improvements need to be made. Mm-hmm. And then it's going back and comparing to how the baseline of the building, the way the building was designed, and seeing how are we going against that baseline. And if we're out of line, then it tells you quickly where to go and make quick improvements. But the important thing is that you wanted continuous commissioning. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we do the initial project up front, everyone gets excited about it, you get away from it, and what happens? The costs continue to start to gradually go up again. So it's the service, it's the maintaining, it's the ongoing commissioning that is just as critical as the front-end work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think I'd like to steal a question from Tim from the other room here. Something that I think can be really relevant to panels like this is to actually give some advice to the audience on how we can get started. So Tim asked in there, if you're an agency and you're thinking about moving forward with sustainability and maybe even smart technologies, how would you do that? I think Mike has some great points that he can share with us today to really talk about, from the Siemens perspective, what are those best practices that you guys could take away from here?
Sure, and it is a little daunting. I mean, we talked to a lot of CSOs, and heck, that was a position that didn't even exist 5 years ago, Chief Sustainability Officers. And many of them have been tagged this great title without a budget, with big lofty expectations, 20 by 20, 20% reduction by the year 2020, or 15 by 15. It doesn't matter what the numbers are, but big lofty aspirations that their board, their stakeholders, whatever it is, it's in their annual report, we're going to do this. And they come back to their office and say, oh my gosh, how do I get there? Where do I start? And when we interview CSOs across the board, pretty much two things they commonly say, and I just referenced a little bit, is one is they need a plan, right? They're in this position, big position. I want a master plan. I want to know where I'm going and how we're going to get there to tie in with the lofty goal. But the other thing they said that they need is they can't wait a couple years for that plan to come to fruition. They need wins on the scoreboard. They need something to be able to point to so they can gauge their audience and their stakeholders, say, see, we're moving in the right direction. And so we looked at that even in our own facilities, and so we came up with, and you can see the chart on the screen, and I'm not going to go through it in great detail, but the point is we wanted some type of mechanism to help our customers figure this out. And so we came up with an approach that is very customizable to our customers' needs. And you can see on the bottom right, the point of entry, and this is a continuous cycle, but the point of entry totally dependent on where your needs are and where you need to start. The state of Mississippi, which I referenced earlier, started off on the left, measure. They said, we're going to measure everything. We're going to get all the data we can. We're going to benchmark it. That information is going to come back to us, and then we can put a plan together. So regardless of where you start, you're probably going to follow the cycle in a systematic way. You don't really skip steps. Others implement. I need the quick win. I need to get something on the board. So they go in and they maybe do some commissioning and they get some quick payback items. But then they've got to make sure, as I mentioned earlier, that those measures are serviced, they're measured on an ongoing basis, and that it helps you re-look at the plan. Also like the state did, where they said every 5 years you've got to re-up the plan. So the point here is that strategy and planning typically is where people start. Because if you don't know where you're going, it's hard to really get started, and you want everyone to have alignment and going in the same direction, an understood strategic plan, but as you heard from earlier, it's got to tie into the mission. Why is it important? And every stakeholder in that organization needs to understand it. Then you go in and you evaluate. That's where some of the analytics and smart technologies can help you with that. Give you all kinds of information. If it stays there, it's just information. You analyze that, and then you decide to implement. And it can be in a very systematic way. You can do it in phases. You can do quick wins, small scale, large scale. You can do an energy savings performance contract. Regardless of what it is, you want to show some results. But if you walk away from that, as I mentioned earlier, your savings are not going to be sustainable, and the impact won't be sustainable. So you've got to have ongoing service and training to make sure those investments pay off. And then, of course, everyone asks for measurements. Transparency is more required today than ever before. And so what that does, though, is it validates the plan. And then you get to see where we're at in our roadmap. Here's the measurements. Gosh, we're a little bit off track. We need to tweak the plan a little bit. And then you start the cycle again.
Thank you. And Barbara, do you have any final words for our audience today on performance?
Well, I'll just say that actually today is an auspicious day to be meeting like this. Just a few blocks away, the Department of Energy is hosting a session with the ESCOs, the energy services companies, the Department of Energy facilitators who help with projects, and government agencies who have an interest in advancing their organization's objectives. So we know that there's a lot of focus on this. We know it's a broad community capable of meeting the needs. We're proud to be part of it.
Excellent. Well, I think we're at the end of today's session. I'd like to thank Barbara and Mike for being up here today and sharing their perspectives, and thank all the panelists that spoke earlier today. I think this was a great discussion. I'd also like to remind everyone that the full report we talked about today is available at govexec.com/GBC. And thank you to all of you in the audience today. We really appreciate you all coming out to discuss this important issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.